Welcome to today's webinar, Picture Books and Challenges, dealing with controversial topics in children's collections. Librarians are tasked with providing a wide variety of viewpoints and information, and sometimes there are conflicts with where and how children's books are cataloged to accommodate what parents and caregivers feel is right for their children. How do we balance open access, accurate classification, and the ease of use for all families without discrimination? This webinar is sponsored by ALA's Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Roundtable and the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable. Thanks for joining us. It's my pleasure to introduce today's guests. Carolyn Caywood became a librarian in 1972. She's worked as a youth services coordinator, library manager, and worked specifically with the Library for the Blind. She retired at the end of 2010. Carolyn wrote a monthly column on library services to teenagers for School Library Journal from 1990 through 1998. In 2006, she was added to the Freedom to Read Foundation's Roll of Honor. Carolyn is currently president of the Norfolk South Hampton Roads chapter of PFLAG and actively works with the Freedom to Read Foundation Executive Board. Peter Coyl is a district manager with the Dallas Public Library. He has worked in public libraries for over 15 years and has served on a library board and been a school librarian. Peter served as chair of the Stonewall Book Awards Committee and is currently chair of the GLBT Roundtable. He is a member of the American Library Association, the Public Library Association, Texas Library Association, and the Freedom to Read Foundation. I am your host, Kristen Peekle, and I'm the Assistant Director at ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom. Today's webinar has a different design than the webinars you may have attended in the past. We'd like you to join in the conversation. There's no order set to our discussion. We may skip around a bit. We may stay on track. We're hoping to include a variety of perspectives and scenarios. Feel free to type in your chat box or use a microphone to share your thoughts and questions with audio. At the top of the screen is a button to raise your hand. If you'd like to speak using your mic, by raising your hand, I will unmute you and give you the floor. Please be brief, and remember this is an experiment, so it may be a little awkward, but we want to hear from you. With that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Carolyn to ask a very important question.
We wanted to know who we're having a conversation with. So could you let us know what kind of library you work in? Or if you're like me, where else you might be librarianing these days? Somebody just left the school library. Well, it would appear we're overwhelmingly public librarians with just one academic librarian and me hanging out as other. And the other question is, does your library have a parenting collection? Okay, somebody marked other. I'm real curious what that means.
It looks like maybe Sarah May is typing an answer, maybe.
So it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, it looks like, though, the majority do not have a parenting collection. So, but 3 people do. By the way, this ought to be a lot of fun with so few people. We can really have a conversation.
So it looks like Sarah May says they have a family place collection, which is for parents of young children, but they don't have a parenting collection. So I guess my
For
question would
those
be,
of you who have, go ahead, Peter.
well, I was going to ask what sorts of things they have in their family place collection, and I want to see if maybe if she can give us a couple ideas of the types of materials that they have in that collection.
Same thing I was going to ask. And I was also wondering about the other parenting collections, what sorts of materials you put there.
Okay, so Sarah May says they have mainly child development and pregnancy books in the family place collection, so it's specific to child rearing, it looks like, in terms of their development in the biology of that. And Jess says they have, in their parenting collection, they have potty training, divorce, and hiding away LGBT picture books. Jess, we'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm glad you brought those topics up. Looks like Barbara may be typing an answer as well. I think while people are typing, I think I'm going to go just maybe to the next slide and just talk about parenting collections here a little bit. So it looks like Barbara talks about the placement. They used to have a parenting collection, the children's room, but now it's a section of books in the adult area. Okay.
When I was still working, we had a parenting collection at the entry to the picture book collection. So it was like around the corner, and it had the potty training, and I guess you'd call them family crisis, family issues kinds of books, as well as child psychology.
Yeah, and we don't have a parenting collection in any of our Dallas library branches. We just have nonfiction and juvenile nonfiction and then picture books. I'm very curious to see if that's something that our customers have expressed a desire, and I'm not aware of that. So Tess says the library that she works at doesn't have a parenting collection, but another branch in the system does, and they put death, illness, potty training stuff, but not LGBT books. And Deidre says parent section is split into parenting books for adults and picture books on difficult topics. Okay. So we kind of have a little bit of like death. Okay. So we have a variety of types of books that people put in. Oh, and Casey says the branch has a typical parenting books between the children's fiction and picture books. So the layout in a standout shelf, but they have very low circulation. So we seem to have kind of, I think,
So placement.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about that, Carolyn.
I was just going to say the placement seems to be a factor in how they're used.
Yeah. So, Casey, do you think that they're hidden because it's the parenting books, or it just happens to be the layout? I don't want to say there's something nefarious in that, but I'm just curious as to if it's designed that way or it just happens to be. Okay, so it just happens to be the weird layout of the library, the multiple large gondolas and the parenting books are placed behind the new picture books. Okay. So I would imagine that if the layout was different, they may have larger circulation, but the being the layout of the library might affect their circulation. Okay.
Or it may be that parenting books just inherently, books on how to be a good parent, I mean, don't get a lot of use because people are too busy doing it to be reading about it.
Yeah, and it's a pretty specific focus too. And I wonder too, depending on what libraries select to put in the parenting collection, how that affects the user's ability to find it, or they might not realize a book is in a parenting collection. They may think a parenting collection is about disciplining your child versus potty training or something like that. So I wonder if the name parenting collection maybe is a misnomer, and maybe that could be a barrier to access too.
Does anybody have such a collection that they think is succeeding? And by succeeding, I think I mean parents are finding it using the materials.
Okay, so Sarah May says, depending on the branch, the family-based collections are well used. So, and see, Jess says topics that require an intermediary between the book and the child, like potty training, death, but those that are misshelved do not circ well. And Deirdre says not circulating well in libraries she's worked. And Evelyn says parents seem to ask for certain topics when they have need or issue. So I guess from the responses we're getting, it seems that maybe parenting collections aren't helpful for parents, maybe separating them out, that they still come to librarians to look. But in Sarah May's case and some other cases, it looks like the collection is well used. So I wonder if it's the type of topics that are in there that would make the success of a parenting collection. That would be an interesting something to look at to see what books go in a parenting collection.
I'm also wondering the appearance. Our intention in creating such a collection was to make it, as it were, a permanent display. Look here on the way into the picture book area. Stuff to help you parent good.
Yeah.
But I agree that on the whole, people would come to the staff asking for the potty training books rather than browse the parenting section.
Yeah, I think, like I said, people might not think that potty training is part of parenting. They may be thinking parenting is in terms of disciplining or something of that nature. So I just wonder if that topic is too broad in terms of the title that is associated with it. Yeah. Carol, I think let's go to the next couple slides, I think, and talk about some different parenting collections. In coming up with this, we talked a little bit about what you put in a parenting collection. That's kind of why we asked the topic in terms of what people have. And another something to think about is we found that some libraries have it specified in their collection development policy that the parenting collection has certain materials. And this is one library, the Washington Avenue branch, and I can't remember which library system this is at. But it talks about the picture books about sensitive subjects. It says timely books for parents and caregivers that offer ideas for developmental and educational activities to do. and strategies to tackle sensitive subjects relating to pregnancy and parenting. Then it continues and talks about the sensitive subjects of illness or death, divorce, body safety, family members' arrest or incarceration, and it leaves it kind of open. It says, and much more. So I wonder how restrictive this would be, and then if this is the collection development policy, how do you decide? Do all of the parenting and pregnancy books go into those, or is it based on an age range? It's to me a little open-ended in terms of what you would put in based on the age range. It doesn't specify with the audience as children, because there's books for parents and caregivers. So I'm not sure which audience they're looking at.
Which raises the question, those of you that have a parenting collection, is that kind of thing spelled out in policy in your library?
Yeah, do you have a collection? Is it part of your collection development policy? And we're going to try and get a poll up here real quick for you guys to click on. So bear with us 1 second while we get that up. So the poll is up, so if you guys want to just click on that and tell us whether or not you have it in your collection development policy. And if you're not sure, go ahead and click the other button if you're not sure what the answer is. Okay, so it looks like a lot of people aren't sure if it's in their collection development policy. I think that's a topic of conversation to have, is, to maybe find your collection development policy and see what's in it. See if there is a specific section just on parenting collections. It's helpful in terms of development policy, and if there are issues that arise, you can have something to kind of fall back. And who makes the decisions about what goes into those sections? Is it the acquisitions librarian? Is it the cataloger? Is the director the person who makes the determination? What kind of criteria? Because as someone mentioned earlier, the parenting collection can be used to squirrel away books that aren't desirable, or customers or even staff have concerns that there may be complaints about. So Tess has a comment to make. She talks about books have to be about that topic. So the book is about divorce, not just it features characters whose parents are divorced. It makes sense. And she says that she thinks that's why LGBT books don't make it over there, because they're often not about being LGBT, but feature a character who is. That's a very good point, Tess. So I think it has to be clear in your collection development policy what materials are going in there. I'm going to go in this poll. Thank you. So this is another example from a website from one library that talks about the scope of the collection. They have it broken down into different categories. And so that's on one library's website. Now that's not their collection development policy, but at least it's a finding aid for the parents to know what is in that. Looks like Sarah May says the books
Thanks, Sarah May.
Yeah, she says that's
clarification.
Yeah, based on the money that they're purchased from. So Sarah, does that mean that you have a specific fund for the parenting collection? Okay, so there's a budget for the parenting collection. Okay, that's very interesting.
I wonder if anybody's sought a grant for one.
That'd be interesting to see if you could get a grant to build a parenting collection. I'm going to go to the next.
I know we
Go ahead, Carolyn.
Oh, I was just going to say we got a grant for a English as a second language collection. So, I mean, kind of similar.
Yeah, we got a grant for Spanish language board books, so I think they're available. Just have to know where to look and how to ask them. And this slide talks about, it's also from one library's website, about the relevant topics, which include things that are in a parenting collection. So I think generally parenting collections tend to include stuff on pregnancy and child development. In this case, it talks about discipline and homeschooling, and they have, in this case, materials for parents of children with special needs. So those materials have been put in the parenting collection of this library system because they deal directly with a topic about parenting, in this case, parenting children who have special needs. Kristen, can we go back to the conversation slides, the topics? Oh, okay, thank you. So we've talked about what, you know, people, libraries have in these collections, and we've talked about the having a collection of policy. Who handles the, well, what needs to be in the selection policy? So I guess my question is, what do you guys as frontline librarians think should be in this collection development policy? Should it specify the type of books? Should it specify the materials? Let's talk about the topics that should be in a parenting collection, or there are things that shouldn't be in the parenting collection. I think then we can go and talk about the problems and challenges of those. So if you guys want to just put some things in the chat about what you guys think about what should be in a parenting collection.
And while we're at that, we all kind of peripherally thought about whether parents want such a collection in when we're talking about whether or not they used it. But does anybody have a stronger sense about how parents feel about parenting collections? Is it something you've had any requests for?
Yeah, and there have been some people who have talked about parents
Sometimes
just come and ask for the books they need on potty training and things. Is it helpful for the parent or for the librarian to have the parenting collection? We have lots of people typing, which makes me happy, at least for some on the radio dead air time, which I think we're okay with. Okay, so Casey has a more of a new parent collection, and she gets more questions about parenting teens, which isn't included there. So I think, Casey, you're talking about traditional, parents wanting to know how to handle teens versus a teen who is a parent. I think that's maybe, I want to make that distinction. Okay, expanding the parenting group for age group. Okay. And Barbara says it should include pregnancy, child development, learning issues, and family issues such as death, divorce, and illness. Okay. Barbara doesn't think picture books should be included. They're for parents to find the information they need. Pregnancy, child development, special needs. Evelyn says that she thinks that all children books are part of a parenting collection. Some parents want the personal views, including what libraries order. I don't like banning books and things of that nature. I'd rather order books and have open discussions with children. And Sarah agrees with Barbara. And Tess says a little of both. I know the parents do ask for books about death, for instance, when there's a death in the family, but new baby books when a new baby is on the way. But I know some staff may sort of censor books they think people might have bad reaction to, like a picture book with a parent with PTSD or something. Not saying it's right or wrong, but it occurs. Yes, that does occur a little bit, and I think it's important for us to talk to parents about what we have in the parenting collection. And so, there are different ways of doing that. And Carolyn, do you want to talk a little about the welcome letter and things like that right now?
I'm thinking, yeah, a little more broadly, actually, not
Okay.
just the parenting collection, but how we as librarians help parents. A lot of libraries, when the parent first applies for a library card or applies for a child's library card, there's some sort of welcome letter, introduction to the library packet, something that provides some information and context. Is it really generic, or is there anything that's specific to parents in your library?
So what sort of information do librarians give when someone gets the library card or visits for the first time? Yeah. We actually here in Dallas, we don't have any sort of welcome letter or brochure. We kind of we lead our customers to our website, which is where we keep all the information, and that way we can update it on a more frequent basis, so it's up to date and readily available.
Our now my information is 5 years old at this point, but our system had a variety of handouts that we kind of picked the ones that seemed to fit the person who was applying for the card.
Yeah, and we used to have a lot of more handouts, but we've scaled back quite a bit, and directed customers to the website. So it looks like most everyone seems to be saying they have kind of a generic brochure, and then Barbara says they have an additional brochure for the children's room. Barbara, does your brochure for the children's room contain information about the parenting collection? It does not. Okay. And Kristen, you're right. It is hard to walk in the library on their first visit, and that's something that I've struggled with. Is we still have to explain to people where things are in the library. But in our branches, we have 28 branches, and they're not the same in terms of layout. So I think part of the problem is having something that is generic enough for everybody in terms of that. But having something generic with policies and information is definitely something that could be uniform throughout the system. We do want to make it easy for people to use the library, so that's something that we're trying to figure out.
And more specific, how we what we have for parents that helps them use the library. So we enumerated here some of the things we could think of. The one-on-one reference interview, obviously. Various kinds of handouts for parents on parenting. I remember back around the year 2000, we had a whole lot of handouts on using the internet wisely.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about whether that's still a strong need.
Yeah, and you can have even a simple bookmark.
General purpose tour.
Yeah, so the bookmark doesn't have to be something robust. It could be generic. It could be small. It could just have the highlights of the library, or highlights about what the parenting collection is, or a kind of a finding guide if people are looking for topics that are in the parenting collection. And in
I'm also hoping that those kinds of things have reinforce a message of um, parenting your child in the library, not turning them loose, that we serve everybody and therefore not everything is going to serve you. You know, the classic intellectual freedom messages. Um, Respect other parents' right to parent their child the way they want to.
And those are things that, as you give a tour to a new library user or group, you can talk about those things as you show them the library, show them the parenting collection. Those are definitely things that you'd want to include on that tour and talk about those things. And even talking on that one-on-one, those sorts of guides to using the library can be very helpful in that time to share that.
Actually, Kristen, rather than a robot, an app might make a whole lot of sense. An app that was sensitive to what part of the building you were in.
There is, Carolyn, there's an app called, I think it's Bluebeam, and it is has some access points in the library. So if you go near a certain part of the collection, it can send something to your phone if you have that app about, so say for example, you are in the travel section, it will, and you're having a program on traveling or something, it will then send a message to your phone when you're the traveling books to suggest that you might want to attend this program. I think ALA had it in the exhibit hall or something at ALA conference this last year. But that's something to look into, that perhaps if you want to help customers better use the library, you could have an app that responds to the location in the library. Oh, Kristen said she'd like one that you find the book in the catalog and the app guides you the exact location. That would be nice. Yeah. So
Has anybody made a video for parents? Actually, an interesting thing with where the book is in the library, since I retired, my system has gone to floating collections, which would really mess with that.
yeah, we have a floated collection here, Carolyn, but we do have specific collections. So the only difference is that the book, might not be at branch A, but it's at branch B, but it's still shelved in that same collection in the library. So I think there are ways to do it. You could have a parenting collection that floats, but whatever branch or building it goes to, it then just goes back into the parenting section. So it's sometimes hard to know what's in your collection, in your building per se, but it's the same if it was just checked out. You just have to put a request and have it sent over. So Tess says they made a virtual tour after a request from a parent with a child with autism. She said him seeing photos of the library would help prepare him for a visit. That's a really good idea, Tess. That's really good. So Evelyn says the peer.
I know when our main library opened, we had a video of it, but it was big, 90,000 square feet. We never did that with the branches.
Yeah. Oh, Casey says Arlington Heights in Illinois has pictures included in their Google Maps location. Well, I'll have to take a look at that, Casey.
Some other things that some people have done to help parents, their websites, literacy programs. I would like to raise a question that I think is behind the question, and that is what goes in the picture book collection, and why is that making some librarians so uncomfortable that they move picture books to a parenting collection? And for me, it all starts with the 5 laws. I've always viewed my role as connecting a reader with the book that works for that reader, and conversely, finding the right reader for the book and doing it efficiently. And I have always been bothered that the way we deal with fiction in general, by alphabetizing it, doesn't help accomplish these things. And it particularly doesn't help when we're thinking about children who aren't reading yet. I'd like to hear what other people think. And particularly if you've feel you've done anything that helps children and their parents use a picture book collection more effectively. Kristen, I like the kid up on top of the books.
I worked at one library when I took over for the school. It was a small school library. The previous person, who wasn't a librarian, had done the picture books based on the animals that were on the cover or involved in it. So you had a bear section and an ant section and a penguin section. But the catalog didn't reflect where they were on the shelf, so it made it very difficult to find the items. But that was, they didn't realize that the catalog needed to reflect that as well. And I'm not sure it was really how helpful it was for the children, because they didn't necessarily, if they didn't like a book about bears, they just skipped that whole section. But then all of the Berenstain Bears picture books were in that one section, which they would have been alphabetically anyway. But it's, how do you decide what the main character is with there's 7 different people going on a trip kind of plot line? It made it a little difficult.
And I think that also gets in the question of real animals like the penguins in And Tango Makes Three versus Tacky the penguin, which just has a child in a penguin suit, essentially.
Yeah, and then what do you do? There was that picture book, I can't remember, about 12 years ago, that photographs of the snowman and the deer came in. I'll have to find the title, but that was actually, it was pictures. So does that go in the picture book because it's photographs of real things, or does it go in the picture books because, even though it's not an illustration?
Barbara, can you tell us a little more about your browsing bins? And thanks, Casey. The front facing certainly helps. I mean, why we think a preschooler can deal with spines is more than I understand. So Tess raises the question of who decides which category a book goes in. And when you say neighborhoods, there are libraries that use that word to describe categories as opposed to the Mr. Rogers neighborhood kind of thing. I'm not sure which way you were going.
I think she's talking about more like the books are in the neighborhood of things that go or nature. That's the neighborhood that they live in. So
it's neighborhood as a category word.
Yeah,
as opposed
I think that's what Tess is saying. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, so the topic also becomes, how to reorganize, and this is, someone's plan that they used to reorganize the picture books on different topics, and they say that they found a 42% increase in circulation by redoing it this way. And Carolyn, how did they decide the topics? I'm not totally sure I remember how that came about.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember. I read the article, now I don't.
Kristen found this.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the thing is that I do genreification, reorganization of picture book projects. It has been like a year-long process where they'll take, a certain section at a time and really go through what they have in their specific collection. The two blogs that I reference here, from the short stack, I think it took her a year to go through the books. This particular our sales category, she said, was one of the more difficult ones that she had, and didn't know how to subcategorize it. And so there was a lot of discussion on how each specific library does it, and I think the blogs are very helpful for how different libraries are doing it. There's no one standard way, so it's really kind of what works for your library.
Okay, so she kind of figured out what worked for her library and categorized them by a topic. So that seems like that would be some work that would need to go into that if someone was willing to do that for their collection, and that definitely is very staff intensive. But in her case, she saw a 92% increase in circulation. So I think there's probably some validity in figuring out a different way of helping children find the picture books that they're looking for. In this way, she did a different way of cataloging it and classifying it and shelving it based on the genre and the topic. Yeah.
Which, of course, still leaves us with the question, if we have a section, a neighborhood for families, uh, we put in our mother's house in that section, what happens next?
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Carolyn. What we may think of family is someone doesn't necessarily agree with that definition. So how do you handle which books go in that section?
And or how can we help parents know what to expect? Something I said to Kristen when we first started talking about this webinar was that my experience has been almost all book challenges start with an element of surprise. It's surprise that this book is in this part of the library, or this book's in the library at all, or what have you. This item doesn't match what I thought I understood about libraries.
Yeah, and Carolyn, I would agree with that. I think,
which, of course, was a limited understanding.
And I think also people are surprised by.
Pardon?
I think people are surprised by the topic. There's something in the book that they weren't expecting the book to be about. For example, in Tango Makes Three, that title and the cover is innocuous. You think, oh, it's two penguins, and they have a child, a little baby penguin. Well, nothing on that cover suggests that they're two male penguins, and I think that's what's shocking to people, and that's what causes them to be concerned, because they're surprised by what's in the book. And I think customers are okay with plot surprises and plot twists, but I think they want their picture books for their children to be specific, and they don't want those surprises. And I think that can be kind of shocking to people.
Oh, Casey, thank you for bringing up labeling. How many of you have heard somebody say, why don't you label the books? I certainly have, repeatedly.
And I'm going to paste here in the chat window here the link to the ALA interpretation of the Library Bill of Rights about labeling systems. And it's pretty broad, but I think it talks about this concept as well. Tess says one parent asked if our checkout machine would ding when someone tried to check one out. So you could notify everyone in the library that they were checking out and Tango makes 3. I bet that would make them feel really special.
I always wanted that grate that opens up and the Empire Strikes Back and dumps you into the pit. However,
yeah. Now we do here have a
possible.
special. So Dallas is a little unique for many ways, but we have a GLPT collection at our Oaklawn branch, and it is the second largest. Maybe the first. It's maybe the largest circulating GLBT collection in America, and those books have a little rainbow flag on the spine. But we also have the regular copies in other branches as well. So, our concern is with privacy. If people check out a book with a rainbow flag, they might not want people to know what they're reading. So we try and have a regular copy in the rest of the branches. So only GLBT books that we label are the ones from the specific collection at this one branch. Carolyn, I see we've put up the tough choices slide. Do you want to talk about this a little bit?
I don't know if any of you. Well, we're getting close to the end of the hour, so I thought I better get there. Has anybody encountered either of these two books? Melanie's Marvelous Measles is intended for families that believe vaccines are a bad idea and that it's a good, healthy thing for a child to have normal childhood diseases. My Parents' Open Carry, I think, is an open book. So, I'm also amused at how blonde and blue-eyed everyone is. That's another matter entirely. Would you purchase these? And what would you do with them? And if somebody stumbled across one of these in the picture book collection, do you think they'd have a surprise?
And would these be in the parenting collection, or would you put it in, with the My Parents' Open Care, would you put that in the Dewey versus the picture book or the parenting collection?
Or, as far as the measles go, too, there's a Dewey number for measles, mumps, and chickenpox. Mm-hmm.
And do we have...
I should add...
Go ahead, Carolyn.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
Oh, another thing that instigated this webinar was that somebody was talking about what to do with this day in June, which to my mind at least raised the question not merely of whether one might put it in nonfiction, but where in nonfiction. Putting this day in, everybody knows this day in June, right?
Well, let's maybe just explain what it is, just in case people don't. So this day in June,
it's about the San Francisco Pride Parade. Yep,
and it's a book in rhyme, and it's it was our Stonewall Book Award winner this last year, and so there was a lot of people had some, and it has a rhyming story, and in the end it has some matter explaining each page, because it takes place in San Francisco. It talks about the history, the painted ladies, and the different things you see in the Pride Parade, and it also has information about talking to children about homosexuality, and I think it has information about same-gender parenting as well. So I think, Carolyn, you were saying that there was some concern about whether that should, where in the nonfiction, if you were going to put it in nonfiction, where you would put it, right?
Exactly. To my mind, at least, putting it in the section of Dewey that has been designated for homosexuality is what I would think of as a biased piece of classification, whereas putting it with other parade books, if I had to put it in nonfiction, makes sense to me.
Yep.
But
But I think also too, Carolyn, the issue is, do you put it in holidays about June or do you put it in the parade classification? Um, we actually talked to Library of Congress about this because I looked at the different classifications and the headings, and there really isn't a narrow enough category other than the general homosexuality category. But if you do holidays, those are broken up by the month that they're celebrated. So it would get even further because there isn't a Dewey number for parades. It's based on the month of the holiday, which is partly why the holiday books and the nonfiction go and that's nice as a calendar because it goes by the month of the year. So you get even further, if you hide it in the June. So that's another issue as well, is when you do put it, the limiting factor of the subject headings and Dewey further limit where you can put it in the nonfiction.
and don't get us wrong, we're not suggesting it ought to be in nonfiction. I think we all agree it's a perfectly suitable picture book. It's simply a book that offers a variety of nonfiction options if one were going that route. And coming back to these two that are pictured here, speaking as a library user, I'd like to be able to find them in the library because I'd like to see what's in them. I don't want to have to spend money on things like that. I consider that a sort of a consumer product information service that libraries do. Let me look at things I'm curious about.
And I think it's important for us to have these books. Um, for example, here in Texas, open carry is becoming a big thing. The law has changed, and in January, anyone who has a concealed carry permit is now allowed to open carry. So if a parent was looking for a book to talk to children about that, I'm not sure how unbiased my parents' open carry is, but that could be a title that they would want to take home with them to talk to their children about. I'm not sure I know of any other picture book about parents owning firearms. So in the absence of those, this would probably be the one that the parent would select.
And no, it probably isn't going to get much of a good review.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you purchase so you got coverage of the topic.
Yeah.
Rather than because it's a sterling piece of literature.
Yeah. So Carolyn, let's go to the next to last slide, because we're running short on time, which is a good thing. We talked a little bit about, where we put the picture books. If you have a book that you're not sure where, this graphic that was made says, would you take that tough book and put it in the parenting collection so it's hidden? Would you put it in the director's office or a restricted area behind the desk? Would you move it to the adult nonfiction? Would you put it in the children's nonfiction? In terms of this day in June, would you put it as a 306? Would you put it in the adult area? Those are all questions that we have to grapple with when we have these tough choices of books that we know that are going to be controversial, or even when someone approaches us about the book and wants it moved from where it currently is, like this day in June. Where would you move it? How would you make that decision? We have multiple people typing, which is good.
Multiple attendees are typing.
Yeah, so I know, I'll just talk while people are typing. So here in Texas, in Hood County, there was a challenge about this day in June, and rather than remove it, the library put it in the nonfiction section because of the end matter, the educational nature of it. But even that, I think, that was a compromise they made to keep it in the library. But I don't know if that was necessarily the right choice to make. But in that case, for that library, that was the decision that they made to make sure that it stayed in the library. And is moving it to one of these areas a form of censorship? Um, I don't know. I think you have to talk about who the audience of the book is and the purpose. Are you moving it to keep it out of children's hands?
Peter,
Yes.
what Dewey number they put it in?
They put it in the 306s, I think. Let me look that up real quick.
This is years ago, and I don't remember if it was Daddy's roommate or what in particular that I had it nonfiction, and a librarian joined our staff who was uh, same-sex marriage and parenting a child, and made a strong statement about why should her child find books relevant to his family in nonfiction when other children found their families in the picture book collection. And I felt really, really guilty after that. But at the same time, I knew I had been trying to make sure that that book was in the library, as it were, fly under the radar of some fairly aggressive activist local censors.
Yeah, and I think those are the tough choices. We want to make the materials available. In that case, unfortunately, that the book was in a different section, but it was still available for that family to have and read. But it segregated them because it was not in the same section as the rest of the books. So those are tough choices. That is a hard decision to make. So I think we are almost out of time, Kristen. Do we have to end it too? Can we go a little longer?
Oh, we do have to end it too. I'm
Okay, okay,
sorry.
okay.
I
All right.
I so hate to wrap
Is
up this
there
great discussion. Um, there are some more opportunities to continue to share your thoughts. We found a couple different blogs that discuss similar ideas about challenging content in picture books. So feel free to continue to discuss this idea and share it with other librarians. We don't want to hide away the difficult topics. This webinar is recorded, and we will be emailing it to everybody, as well as let me get this up here right away.
is there an evaluation form?
There is, and I'll get to that slide in just a second. I just don't want to forget to give you guys the resources.
Oh, the handout. Yes, yes. So I'm seeing lots of people that are wanting a part two. I think when you get the evaluation, if you make those comments and suggest that, I definitely think that will be helpful. This is the first time that we've sponsored a webinar from the GLBT Roundtable. So if this is something that you guys want the roundtable to do more of, we would definitely want to hear from you on your suggestions on topics. So I would put that in your evaluation as well. And my Twitter handle is up at the top. If you don't have Twitter, you can contact me. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of if you guys want to suggest other topics for webinars.
Definitely. And can you guys see the file up there that says resources.pdf?
I can. Okay, yes, Casey says she
Okay,
downloaded
good.
it fine. Okay.
So not only is it there for you to download as well, but if you need to, there is an actual link to go to. It talks a lot about the different policies that we looked at, the different libraries that have parenting collections, resources and blogs about the libraries that have chosen to reorganize, things like that. So feel free to download that handout. And then, yes, we do have a slide with the survey link. So feel free to do that. And we have a compilation of censorship in the news, and you're welcome to subscribe. There's a link to the short survey, and there are multiple ways that you can reach the Office for Intellectual Freedom. And don't hesitate. Anybody can contact us if you have questions, if you have concerns, or you just want to report a challenge. When you think something might be censorship and you're wondering if moving it to a different location qualifies that, feel free to contact our office and just talk it over with us. So I just want to say thank you to our sponsors, the Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Roundtable, and the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable, and a special thanks to Peter and Carolyn for their time and guidance. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure talking with all of you and having this discussion. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.